Chronicle Vault presents Minoans, the civilization that disappeared without explanation. At the edge of the tide, there is a large island known as Crete. This is home of one of the civilizations most amazing and developed from the Bronze Age. This civilization has almost remained forgotten in history, and its discovery. It was thanks to the great efforts of one man named Arthur Evans. He was one English archaeologist who inherited one large fortune from his father, who was also an archaeologist. He traveled to Greece to study the rubble. In the city of Mycenae, he found evidence of a civilization unknown. This led him to several places in Greece, in search of answers. Finally, Arthur arrived on the island of Crete, where, guided by stories of the local population, found the place where the legendary palace of Knossos once stood. The palace that belonged to King Minos. From the legend of the Minotaur, excavations of the site yielded incredible discoveries that would make Arthur dedicate his whole life to your searches. He called the people he had discovered Minoans. The name was given in honor of King Minos, that according to Greek myth was the son of Zeus. It is likely that the Minoans arrived in Crete from Nathan, where today is present-day Turkey. Such migration occurred during the Paleo period, more than 120,000 years before Christ. However, the culture, Minoan, only began to develop with the domain of agriculture. What happened around the year 5000 before Christ? With the advancement of Bronze Age, the Minoans began to develop a culture based on trade, maritime, making use of your boats, incredibly advanced for the time. Minoan vessels were elegant and hardy, ideal for transporting food and goods, thanks to the ability to sail for days at sea. The Minoans began to trade with peoples of Anatolia, Phoenicia, Greece, Egypt, and Africa. Their culture began to flourish in several aspects. How the island decrees offered natural protection. She was not the victim of invasions by other peoples during centuries. Around the year 2000 before Christ, the greatest source of income for the Minoans was agriculture. Produced olive oil, wines, and ceramic pieces, with beautiful paintings. Minoan art highlighted all the sophistication of those people. His paintings had a unique style and exhibited a very advanced artistic level. The beauty of the women on that island were exalted in several representations, with long hair, dark and wavy, colorful dresses and makeup on lips and eyes. Men were usually represented with brown skin, with bodies and haughty posture. The Minoans also produced gold and silver jewelry, and even aluminum parts, despite not having a society, war-oriented. The Minoans kidnapped the warriors who had, with a duty to protect the palaces, vessels to fight pirates and possible invaders. The Minoans valued physical and athletical development. They invented sports and competitions, like swimming, boxing, and running. But maybe the practice most impressive was to dance around and jump over angry bulls. This practice is called toracatapsia and consisted of in grabbing the bull's horns during its attack. When the bull shook his head up in an attempt to break free, or athlete took advantage of the impulse to make acrobatic jumps over the animal. For the Minoans, bulls were holy creatures and were constantly exalted in sculptures and paintings. Everything indicates that Minoan religion was matriarchal, with the figure of a holding two snakes like being the supreme deity. During the excavations carried out by Arthur Evans, clay platelets were found, with unknown writing, much of which cannot be translated to this day. To Arthur's surprise, and everyone involved in the excavations, the palace of Knossos was much bigger than expected. Or Palace of Knossos has more than 700,000 square meters, being 3 times larger than Buckingham Palace. In England, during excavations, the possible throne of King Minos has been discovered, which is the oldest throne in all of Europe, and the road was also discovered. Oldest paved in Europe, this road was at the entrance to the city and divided into streets surrounding the houses and temples. Some parts of the city had a water drainage system that functioned as sewer, and something surprising was found. Below the palace, there were, in fact, one labyrinth. This labyrinth contained several huge jars that should be used to store grain and wine, and some parts of the labyrinth looked like they had been used as brunettes for prisoners. In coins of that period were coined drawings of labyrinths and the Minotaur, which reinforces the strange legend about the creature. The island of Crete is in a region where there is a lot of seismic activity. To this day, earthquakes and strong waves occur from the sea. By Volta of 1750 BC, there was one earthquake in Crete. that destroyed most of the Minoan constructions. The Minoans, however, remained on the island and its palaces and houses. The historians of ancient Greece, Herodotus and Thucydides, claim that the Minoans became lords of the sea ice, and that they had ended piracy in the region. They'd other islands near Crete. And Tuxides tell that King Minos sent your children to rule these islands in the middle of 1700 before Christ. The Minoans were already a famous and respected people. Same kingdoms that arose in Greece, like Mice and Oxygen, recognized the independence of the Minoans. Crete had become a temporary stopping point for the countless vessels coming from many regions. Merchant ships coming from Egypt sold their products in Crete, and from there, these products were taken to Greece and Anatolia. And the same happened with products from other regions. In Minoan society, there is no indication that there is much imbalance between rich and poor, and the population is always represented working together. The women were also portrayed as an important part of the kingdom, and not just as a wife or daughters, as it happened in other cultures of the same period. There is a strong bond between the Minoan civilization and the legendary city of Atlantida. The first records about were left by Plato, writings between 428 and 347 BC, i.e., Plato was inspired by something that happened 1,000 years before its time. At the time Plato lived, the Minoans were already part of past stories. Because of this, and due to being based on exaggerated tales, Plato imagined and described an ancient kingdom that was more advanced and powerful than the realms of their time. But not everything was the fruit of Plato's imagination. How can we see so far? The Minoans were in fact one advanced people for their time, and very ingenious. There were many theories of where would be, but most likely, it is the Minoan city, which was on the island of Santorini. The island of Santorini was one of the most important islands for the Minoan trade. And on this island there was a huge volcano. When the volcano exploded and erupted, destroyed almost completely the island and its constructions. Much of the island sank into the sea, everything with her. This greatly affected the Minoan trade with the northern kingdoms. As if that wasn't enough, shortly after, a huge cataclysm occurred, in which a strong earthquake, followed by a tsunami, with waves over 20 meters high, affected all of Greece, and mainly the island of Crete. The devastation was much larger than that caused by an atomic bomb. And again, the houses and palaces were destroyed. With size and seismic activity, the volcano on the island of Santorini erupted again, and despite the distance, his ashes invaded the island, blocking sunlight and generating a mist. Toxic that killed plants and animals. A period of hunger and brought uprisings and violence across the island, with the situation reaching a point of despair. And there are indications that the Minoans had to resort to cannibalism. Unfortunately for the Minoans, not even they could fight the forces of nature. And one of the most advanced societies of its time was decayed into savagery. A disaster of such proportions served as inspiration for Plato to create his history about the city of probably never existed. What actually makes her a myth? The resilient Minoan people were courageous and still tried to rebuild their cities. But at this point, the economy was already weakening, and the Minoan kingdom was losing its riches as other kingdoms grew. The Greek kingdom of the Mycenaeans had already been conquering almost all of Greece, and they were already advancing towards the islands of the sea ice. It is not known for sure whether the Mycenaeans took Crete strength or offered help in exchange for ceding the territory. The fact is that the Minoans and the Mycenaeans merged their cultures, and 2 centuries later, were starting to recover the island of Crete. According to Homer, in his epic poem about the Trojan War, the mixed ships commanded by King Agamemnon towards Troy from the island of Crete. In 1200 before Christ, Mycenaean rule over Crete went into decline, much due to pirate attacks that had been devastating everything in their path. Even the mighty Egypt suffered great losses against the sea ice pirates, also known as the people of the sea. The last inhabitants of Crete abandoned the big cities and have enriched themselves for over a century. In the mountains of the island, it allowed other people coming from Greece occupied the ancient Minoan cities, who were no longer able to stay against invaders. And so, one of the most splendid cultures of the ancient world had come to an end. The Minoan civilization is considered the first great European civilization, and his influence was enormous for the Greek peoples. That came later too. Thanks to them, trade and contact between many civilizations became possible in the Bronze Age. Great civilizations don't disappear overnight, as in the legend of, but their stories can be as amazing and rich as those imagined by the best writers and poets.
Subscribe to the Vault of Chronicles channel. Stories you've never heard, every day here.